Well, thank you, Greg Lundgren, for taking the time after your, seems like, completely manic, long hours of many long days project in the middle of this de-install to talk with me about your amazing twists and turns as an artist and as a person with art in the general sphere of your mind all the time and all the things that you do for others. And if anyone could just possibly see this space and know what has been in it and is slowly getting de-installed from it, I think it's hard to even paint a picture in audio, so we're doing a huge disservice by not doing a video interview.
You're in a really big semi-industrial space that is at the top of a train station in Seattle, Washington.
Yes. And it's
that's where you are right now.
That's
yes. Where we are right now.
Before the art got there, that's what it was.
Yes, now it looks something like an exhibition space or a gallery.
A half de-installed exhibition space.
A half de-installed exhibition space.
And kind of studio space where I see new projects kind of coming together.
Yeah,
like
it never ends.
You get one done before you start another one.
It's a good place to build.
So, first of all, tell me, do you remember, how do we know each other? How did we meet?
I don't know where we met. I think that's the funny thing about Seattle and about my terrible memory. But I do remember the first thing that I saw I think that the closest thing was seeing the installation that you did at the TK building probably 12 years ago with the glowing blue rocks or whatever that my memory serves me. There was some kind of blackout installation with some glowing objects that you had done. I think that was the first time that I had crossed paths with you.
Huh.
Pretty sure. I don't even know if we knew each other when I saw that, but maybe we met shortly after that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't remember that. I just always knew your name, and eventually someone was like, no, that's that guy who has that name, and then I finally put a face to the name. But, oh yeah, so how long have you actually been in Seattle, though? You took a hiatus out, right? You've been in Seattle making art pretty consistently for a while, but you went away, you came back. What is that story of your sort of art making and location? Well, maybe there's a reason I didn't know you for a period of time, because you moved away, right?
No, I grew up here, and I left when I was 18, and I swore never to come back. I moved to Southern California, and I went to school in Los Angeles, and for the first couple of years, I was really kind of glad to be away and glad to be in a new environment, and this was kind of pre-grunge and pre-Microsoft success, and Seattle really wasn't on anybody's radar. It wasn't on anybody's map. And so the first year I moved to Los Angeles, I'd tell people I was from Seattle and was kind of quite embarrassed about it, or they didn't even know what state Seattle was in. This is literally, this is 1988, and Seattle was not a cool place to live at all. It could have been Boise, Idaho. It could have been Billings, Montana. It just was somewhere up north.
Seattle's some state, that place.
Yeah, and then I succeeded in staying in Los Angeles all through the heyday of the kind of Nirvana, Soundgarden musical fanfare, and moved back to Seattle. And
what year did you move back to Seattle?
Well, it was either 1994 or 1995. My memory gauge or my timing gauge is that Kurt Cobain committed suicide a month after I returned. So that's how, whatever year Kurt Cobain committed suicide, that was the season that I returned to Seattle. And I think I did because I'd come home for Christmas and I'd come home for Thanksgiving. And every time I came home, I realized that Seattle was a little bit better than I had imagined it. And it stacked up a little bit higher than what my Los Angeles experience was. And I think I also managed to hit Los Angeles during the LA riots and the Northridge earthquake and the Malibu fires. I kind of hit every natural social disaster that could have happened when I was there. So I moved back in 1995, and came back with a lot of confidence, I guess, or the things I was terrified in maybe terrified is a strong word, but I was very, I was kind of just frightened of expressing myself or being creative in Los Angeles. I worked at a studio in Venice Beach, but I painted and I made sculpture, but I wouldn't have petitioned to show my paintings in a coffee shop in in Venice. Like I didn't feel I didn't feel confident. But I moved back to Seattle, and I kind of felt like anything was possible. You could do anything, and I immediately started designing. I started designing theater sets. I was designing furniture. I was painting. I was writing books. I was staging performance art things, kind of pretty quickly. And it was just kind of based on this like total freedom of like not being judged and not feeling like the stakes seemed so low. And I think it took me leaving Seattle for 7 years for me to realize that.
That's cool. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, trying to leave, this is always such a city that'll invite you back no matter how long you've been gone. It seems like this very loyal, it's like a loyal, dowdy woman who's like, I've been waiting for you whenever you come back to me. It's fine, I'll still hold you and love you. I'm gonna cry for 9 months of the year, but I'm still just gonna be comfortably all yours.
I think I'm totally in love with Seattle, and it took me that time away to maybe realize what real opportunity is. And I think I moved to Los Angeles thinking that was how you got famous, or that's how you got rich, or that's how you got discovered, or however what that is. And but I found it to be very stifling creatively, or very intimidating. And I think I'd rather live in an environment that I didn't feel intimidated in.
Yeah.
That like to me it's like whether I'm qualified or talented or capable, I will do whatever I want to do unabashedly and without any shame. I'll be like, I'm gonna write a play, I'm gonna stage performance art, and I don't feel intimidated by it, and I don't feel judged by it, and I don't feel like it's outside of the grasps, whether that's financially or community and finding people to collaborate with. I think that maybe it's totally delusional, but I feel like there is like so much opportunity. Maybe not the same level of opportunity that you would get from staging a play in Manhattan or making a movie in Los Angeles, but I think that the difference is you can actually do it here, top to bottom, and
on your own terms, really.
And you're on your own terms and have a lot of support.
Yeah.
And I think living in New York or Los Angeles, I wouldn't have made, for one reason or another, I would not have actually rose my hand as often, and I wouldn't have finished as often as I have been able to do in Seattle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at this point, you are definitely one of the big fish in town, as among the artists, and you've just been around a long time making things happen, and as you said, unabashedly, it seems to have really paid off. But I wonder about your first art project that you feel like was, that you really raised your hand and put it out there, or one of the first that you got back to Seattle, you found that confidence. And what was the process like with that first real foray into, okay, I'm going to do this? What was that?
Probably the first big one. I mean, I did shows in coffee shops, and I designed a lot of theater sets, but they were always kind of low-hanging. They weren't very high visible things. They didn't scare me. I think the first thing that kind of scared me a little bit, or that at least intimidated me, was I decided that I wanted to protest at the Federal Building in downtown Seattle. And
what were you protesting?
I was protesting the concept of work that
Wafa.
Yes, it was AFWFA, which is Artists for Work-Free America. And it started off as this absurdist, very Dada performance piece where it was nothing more than to like protest against the most absurd thing I could think of, which was like that no one should work, and that so I created all these slogans like alarm clocks kill dreams, and just kind of ended up writing this manifesto about how we need to employ technology and robots to do work so people can be artists, because that's the one thing that robots will never infringe upon. It's one thing robots can't do is dance and screw and express themselves. And the funny thing is it turned from this total absurdist idea into this real kind of passionate, real thing. But we protested the Federal Building in 1996, and I got together a lot of the theater actors and musicians and director that I worked with a lot, and kind of employed them as my performance art troupe. And I think it was great. And I have great photographs that we probably had 60 people at the Federal Building with signs and bullhorns, and we made T-shirts, and I had written.
I ordered one of those T-shirts.
I have it, yeah. But we made T-shirts and billboards, and I wrote 2 short stories that were really kind of like just little political propaganda short stories about why people shouldn't work, and it was. I think at that moment, like, I was really wanted to just be the producer, and I was not an actor. I was not really that comfortable shouting in front of a federal building, and I don't know. That was the first kind of one that what's the word? That I woke up very nervous in the morning. I've done a series of them since, but that was the first one that I think actually kind of scared me a little bit, or
which made it real in a different sense.
Yeah, I mean, even being absurdist, it was, the idea of there could be police, there could be counter-protesters. I mean, certainly people didn't understand what we were doing. Yeah, there was all sorts of, people got kicked.
There were counter-protesters, they were called employees trying to get to their desks.
Yeah, it was not without a little bit of violence. There's a lot of people that didn't understand it, or that were angry, or this was pre 9/11, so there really wasn't like a terrorist threat in the federal building complex, but I think that there was certainly a lot of people that I don't know. It was a really fond memory, but kind of maybe my coming out as a director, my coming out as like as an organizer more than. I think you can be a painter and quietly make your work in your living room, and you take it in, you quietly hang it on a nail, and then you kind of sit back and sip a cup of coffee and like watch people interact with your work, but you never really raise your hand. You don't have a bullhorn. I think that when you do things like that are performance related, or that you're producing events, then you're a little bit more in the spotlight, and especially when they're kind of live and unpredictable, you are accountable, and you are the person that has to talk to the police, or you are the person that has to talk to the...
Who's in charge? Oh,
yeah, you are the person that has to talk to the reporters and try to explain to King 5 News why you're protesting work and why you think robots should take over the world. So I think, yeah, that was certainly one of my first.
That's a good one, a great one to start out with. And the project that you remember me for, that was really the first project that was not making a painting and hanging on a wall. It was the first time I got scared in the morning as well. So at least
that's a good feeling, or it's an important feeling.
It is an important feeling.
Not all the time, but every once in a while.
Well, yeah. If you turn the dial up and down as you liked, that'd be kind of nice.
Yeah.
So, of your projects, what about a recent art project? What's your most recent project? I mean, we're talking about this space being deinstalled. Do you want to talk about Out of Sight a bit? This recent, huge endeavor?
No, I don't want to talk. No. Sure, I can talk about that. I think I was involved in some early kind of steering committee meetings with Vulcan. That's Paul Allen's production company, or overall company. And Paul Allen had just returned from Venice Biennial and was inspired and wanted to do something that kind of mirrored that or echoed that or was inspired by that in Seattle. And so we all sat around a table, and there was I'm sure I was the least qualified person in the room. There was a lot of people that I respected, and a lot of people that had a lot more history and curatorial, art dealers, that type of crowd. And I think that there's a lot of really cool ideas that were put on the table, and I think my general impression walking out of that first meeting was that it wasn't something that I was going to be participating in. Like, I wasn't going to be an exhibitor, I wasn't going to be a producer, but I was really kind of inspired by it and excited by it, and I saw that it was kind of a very rare opportunity and a very rare moment for Seattle. And I think really this was maybe a year and a half ago, more than that, But I was like, you know what, I'm going to do something. I'm just not going to, I'll do it the same weekend, but I'm not going to be the person in a convention center.
Well,
I'm not going to be...
And we started talking about the concept of the satellite fair, how it's not always the main fair is the only thing going on. There are these other fairs made by independent people. They do these other satellite fairs. They come around all the time.
Yeah, I think that if they came at it from a different angle, that I probably wouldn't have done a satellite fair. I think that the only... My main reason or my main emphasis in doing this was kind of feeling like that Seattle artists were being really excluded from what was happening.
The Seattle Art Fair.
It felt very much like, yeah, you don't call it the Seattle Art Fair if 3/4 of the galleries are from out of town. No, I felt like Seattle Art Fair was not celebrating the people that I felt deserved to be celebrated. I felt like the Seattle Art Fair was not championing local artwork. I think that, you know, way before even the Paul Allen conversation, my advocacy has always been for Seattle to be exporting our artists, for Seattle to like recognize how much talent we have locally, and really putting a value on that and really respecting that. And seeing it as something that we should be pushing out into the world. And I felt like what the Seattle Art Fair was, what their prerogative was to use Seattle as a stage for bringing a lot of other outside artists and outside dealers into Seattle, basically importing culture and showing it to a regional crowd. And so I think that was
to a regional crowd that's already rich in that commodity, in that resource.
Yeah, I felt like it was completely backwards from the way I think that if you have, my example was like, it's like importing bottled water to Seattle where we have so much clean, fresh water. Why on earth would you go through all the trouble and spend all the money to bring in bottled water from California or from Fiji or wherever you're going to bring it in from? It was more like, we have this natural resource here. We should be bottling it and putting it on trains and planes and automobiles and pushing it out into the world. I think that was maybe the fundamental difference between the way that the Seattle Art Fair perceived an art event and the way I perceived what that art event should be. So, and again, I didn't mean that, it wasn't that there was no ill will, there was no anger. It was just a matter of like saying, it's a different jive, it's a different prerogative, but I am going to take that window of opportunity, and I'm going to kind of try to help. I'm going to try to piggyback on a lot of that energy and a lot of the money that was put into it, and put something together that actually was an export, that was designed to showcase Seattle talent and hopefully get on the plane with the people that were coming in through Seattle for that week. So that's how it was. That's kind of how it was formulated.
And did that work? Do you feel like it was successful, given the concept that you started out with, and of course a lot of experiences I'm sure came along and sort of, you know, slightly molded that and reshaped it, along with just having to do it rather than just think about it. But do you feel like from where you started and, you know, by the end of it, did you succeed at what you set out to do?
Yes, I do. I unequivocally do. I think I'm still too close to it to get that kind of perspective.
You sound tired.
I am tired. I've got a headache. I'm tired. I've been down here every day of the week. But I do feel like it succeeded, and I think, you know, that question's been asked a lot of like, do you think it's a success, or how do you judge a success? Is it based upon money? Is it based upon attendance? Is it based upon the quality of the work? You know, what are the factors that you use to judge that? And I think that I've always held I've always looked at it through one lens, no matter if it's a play or a performance or a sculpture or a novel or whatever it is. It's like, I judge it 5 minutes before the doors open. I judge it before I push send to the publisher to print it, or I'll judge it.
I judge it after the doors open. I'm like, I don't know until it gets a response.
Oh, see, I don't think, I think that's, to me, that's dangerous.
It is dangerous.
I think, to me, I walked around this 24,000 square foot space, you know, half an hour before the press preview on Thursday, and looked at the space as a physical creation of like what needed to happen in order to kind of convert a warehouse, kind of a raw kind of warehouse-looking space into a gallery. And I looked at it from the work that we selected to hang and how it was hung, and I really made that judgment before the doors opened to the public. And I think, to me, it's the way I've always operated. I think otherwise, one critic could come in and write you a shitty review, or
you might believe it.
Nobody buys anything, but it's great work, or 20 people show up instead of 20,000 people, or there's so many variables that are outside of your control that I really firmly believe no matter what you create, you have to find your own validation, you have to find your own approval based upon your own measures that are independent of sales, that are independent of critics, that are independent of attendance or visibility. I think that those are factors, and I think that they might contribute to the holistic, long-term vision of the project. But the way that I really judge success is before other eyeballs and other opinions and other people's money comes into play. I have to look at it at that birth moment, and I felt very pleased with it.
That's great. I'm so glad I didn't even get to see the closing night or the opening. I missed the whole thing, but I thought, well, if I'm going to miss it, I don't want to catch just a tiny part. I'd rather come for the debriefing and come for the very end and see how it, hear what happens after the fact, hear the tales that are told of the battle that was just won. So
yeah, I mean, I think that there's sometimes there's things that you just feel like you need to, let me back up. To me, there's a critical moment. We had the keys. I got the keys to the space 6 weeks before the exhibition opened, which required building the walls, installing lighting, finishing the space, cleaning out the space, building furniture, building plinths. I mean, like just top to bottom, there was 6 weeks. And there was a moment where it's like, you could back out and just say, no, there's not enough time, or there's not enough money, or there's not enough X, Y, or Z. And I think that to me, it was really a matter of like, either you step up and try, or you sit on the sidelines and watch. And I felt like it would have been almost criminal to sit on the sidelines and just watch this,
especially at that point,
international, shit show happen, and not participate. So I think I knew that you kind of had to do it, and I don't know what I think at that stage I didn't really have like set expectations of like, well, we're going to sell X amount of dollars of work, or we're going to have this many people come through, or the New York Times is going to love us. Like, none of those are really factors. I think it really came down to this very black and white issue of either you play or you sit. And even if I screwed it up, I'd rather be accused of playing badly than sitting it out because of any host of reasons. I felt like it required. It was just that moment where you get off your ass and you do it. It doesn't happen very often. I mean, I don't think it's happened once in the 20 years that I've been back where felt like there's this moment, this like window of opportunity that could really change the way the city works and feels and plays with each other. And I feel like that was the summer, and I feel like it really set the stage for next year. And I think that what's happening is there's going to be this tradition that this was the first year of it, and Seattle Art Fair will be back next summer, bigger and better, and the space will be back next summer, bigger and better, and maybe that lasts 5 years, maybe it lasts 25 years, maybe it lasts 100 years. But I'm really pleased and really excited that I didn't sit it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations on not sitting it out, even though you're coming down with a cold now.
We'll see. It took every ounce of energy, every dollar that I had, every kind of psychic reserve I had. I'm spent. Yeah. It took it all.
I mean, you're no stranger to putting all of your resources into what you love and believe in, and that's not just your resources of the enthusiasm and time, but like your money. I mean, from what I remember, you put together grants, like the arbitrary art grant. You funded that yourself, right? You just came up with some money, like, fuck it, I'm just gonna come up with some money and throw it at some people. What's the most arbitrary way I can talk about granting?
Yeah, I've done. I mean, for the longest time, I had a day job, and I made pretty good money, or at least what I thought was pretty good money for being in my late 20s or my early 30s. And I kind of split it in half, and I used half to pay rent and eat and pay bills, and I used the other half to make art or give money away. I guess my definition of making art doesn't necessarily require having a paintbrush in my hand or a chisel in my hand. I think that
the act of giving the money away was its own art project?
You can make art in a lot of ways, and I think that sometimes that is activating space, sometimes that's inspiring other people, sometimes that's being the producer or the curator or the host, or the clown, or just trying to present different models of what you think contemporary art should be. And I think that's probably been maybe my singular thread between all of my projects, is that I totally refuse to accept the art world the way that it is. And I think that
what do you refuse to accept? What's on their list of those things? What are those features that you refuse to accept?
That art is a commodity, that art is exclusive, designed for a certain group of people that can afford it or that are educated enough to understand it. I think that art is it's a language, and it's a language that helps everybody express themselves. And I think that when you take people's ability to express themselves away, that you end up with wars, and you end up with bad presidents, and you end up with social problems, and you end up with domestic violence, and you end up with drug addicts. I think that if you can use art and really see it as this tool that is made for the mass of humanity, that is made for everybody, and get people comfortable confessing, and get people comfortable sharing what they're afraid of and what they're excited about and who they are and what they want. If you can get people to feel comfortable communicating, I think it solves so many problems in the world. And I think that we don't really live in that world right now. I think that art is seen as something that is for a very limited number of people. It's something that is not designed as this inspiration for other people to participate. I think it's very exclusive, and I think that a lot of my drive is to make art inclusive. A lot of my drive is to make people realize that they don't have to go to school to do it. They're never too old to do it. That they don't need tools. They don't need a studio. They don't need a gallery to represent them. That what they really need to do is just have a little bit of courage and a little bit of confidence and a little bit of risk, and that could be written on a piece of paper saying that you're gay, or it could be written on a piece of paper saying that you, I don't know, that you like a dumb TV show. I don't know. Yeah. It doesn't matter what it is, I think. But
confessing is almost at the center of
it. I mean, I always go back to Thoreau, who famously said, the massive men lead lives of quiet desperation. And I think that is something that I don't remember. I don't memorize a lot of things, but I remembered that, and I memorized that in my 20s. The massive men lead lives of quiet desperation. And I think that is that is the bullseye on the target of my interest in the arts, and that is like the mass of men should lead lives of adventure and risk and self-expression, and in trying to figure out what it is to be human, and trying to find community, and trying to find acceptance, and trying to find...
Giving away at least one of them that they have found, give it away and express it.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the artist's job, is to kind of be that court jester. It's the artist's job is to be like the Olympic athlete of failure, and the Olympic athlete of like trying. And I think, you know, you can watch someone ski down a hill at 200 miles an hour and know that there's so few people in the world that can do that, but it might inspire people to ski down the mountain at, you know, 20 miles an hour. And I think that to me, I want the professional artist's job to be that job description, to be that they are doing things that are extreme examples of self-expression, extreme examples of vulnerability, extreme examples of risk-taking, and that not expecting that everybody is going to go at that level, but they'll at least maybe feel more comfortable with the way they dress, with the way they present themselves, with the music that they like, with standing up for opinions that they believe in, for taking a chance, for telling someone that you like them, or that you like them.
Come on, it's not even like them. It's like being willing to say you love them and say what you love about the world.
Yeah, I think that we live in a lot. When I say we, it includes myself. It's like we do live in fear, and we are afraid of being judged, and we are afraid of being misunderstood, and we are afraid of failing, and that keeps us from living in a lot of ways. And I think that the artist's job is to kind of be that extremist, and to show by example that the only way to truly live is to be a little bit fearless. Maybe that's today's opinion.
That's today's opinion.
But that's all. I'm a work in progress. But that's what I got so far.
I like what you got so far. I wonder about, you talk a lot about how just in the creation of art really is its own entity, and the pursuit of it in its own way. You did talk about at one point your splitting of your finances to pay for these things versus that. And I love that ratio. We should probably come up with like a pie chart, send it out as like an easy PDF. Download this, and operate this way. You might end up with your priorities in line. That's a great way to split things up. But I wonder how you've been able to manage, making a living and continuing to make a rich life. What's your particular approach to that? I know you're very much an entrepreneur. You've started several businesses. You work extremely hard. Everyone knows you in many different sort of circles for what you do and your activities. It's kind of, you're prolific not just as an artist, but as an entrepreneur and as a mover and shaker and engager of society on all kinds of levels. So how have you what's your, not formula, but what has been your process to bring that together and patchwork such a rich life in so many ways? And also, I guess a two-part question. As you discuss that, do you have any, and it's a long process, it's not like overnight, boom, well, if you pick, buy gold at $4 a bar, you're going to be fine, like something like that. But if you go the right way, what would be some first steps that you did take, or that you would encourage someone to take to get a life balance that allows them to be doing and living in such a rich way that you clearly have been?
I don't think there is I don't think that there is a balance, and I certainly haven't found it. I'm a terrible business person. I think that what I am good at is being an optimist, and every business that I started, I had these grand visions of making a lot of money on. Honestly, I think that I started to, I would start a project thinking that this was going to pencil out and I was going to make a ton of money, and that would allow me more freedom to do this, or I was good. And so everything that I've started, I can look at in retrospect, or I can look at even at the moment, and I find the success in that I did it the way that I believed in it. I did it. I took an idea through fruition. I didn't compromise my values. I never put a TV set into my bar, or I never made things out of plastic when they could be made out of bronze. Like I feel like I did it the right way, but I didn't make nearly the money that I thought I would make. And in a lot of cases, I suffered. And I don't think that there is like this bulletproof plan. I think you can be fiscally responsible, and by all measures you would never start any of these projects because there's not enough guarantee.
You're not fiscally responsible.
That's, I think that yeah, I mean, if I were to just look at like my life as an investment, or my life as like being responsible with my money, it would not be opening businesses. It would not be starting art exhibits. It would not be starting new companies. I think that there's a tremendous amount of risk, and there's a tremendous amount of false expectation. But in the same token, like I have no regrets about any of the things that I've started, and I have no regrets about where I've spent my money. I think that some of them have performed better than others, and some of them might catch on tomorrow. I'm still waiting for that phone call or that email that guy from so-and-so is going to just flip things around. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask if you're looking for like this financial golden arrow. I've had my bank account dip into overdraft, for my whole life, and if I believe in something, I will put every penny I have into it.
I like to say that's what credit cards are for.
I don't like to use credit cards anymore. I've had an experience with credit cards, but I've taken out a second mortgage on my house to start a business. I have borrowed money from friends to do projects, and I think that I think you have to ask I don't know, I don't put a lot of, to me the only thing money is good for is to activate something. I don't collect money. I don't just have a value of money for money's sake, or money for security's sake. I think that if someone, that's probably a really horrible attitude, but if I had $100,000 in my bank account, I would probably just start
You would not have $100,000.
Well, if someone
because it would go right
some
away.
lost uncle dies and I get $100,000, I would spend it, and I'd buy like a boat and turn it into a residency, or I'd buy a piece of property, or I'd start a new business, or I would do something. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'd screw off the money. It wouldn't be all spent on cocaine and prostitutes and Las Vegas casinos.
I was going to say hookers and blow.
Yeah. No, I would spend it on what I felt was going to be a way to either be a long-term investment for myself, or it would be something that I, in my delusional way, thought that I could, double my money or something like that. But I wouldn't like invest it in Apple stock and just sit on it. I wouldn't invest it in someone else's project. I always have felt like if I'm going to lose money, it's going to be losing money on my own projects. It's not going to be
have fun losing that money.
Wall Street banker losing it for me. So yeah, I'm terrible with money, but I do seem to make the most with the money that I have, and that like I won't say how much it cost for me to like open this exhibit, but like it was probably I'm sure it was a fraction of what it would have cost other people to do it, and it's because
you had good
I'm resourceful.
Right? Yeah,
I'm sorry?
you had good partnerships. You had the right kind of things put together.
And I know how to frame a wall, and I know how to, load in drywall, and I know how to like mud and tape, and I know how to hang electrical. I think that it became something that I put in a lot of sweat equity, and I call in favors, and I do a lot of things that that try to make it as economically viable as possible. So yeah,
Yeah, actually, could you talk? I don't want to like talk numbers or too much information, but you know, it's people wonder how does a person put together an exhibition like this? This is huge, and I always like to try to kind of pull back the curtain and demystify it a little bit because maybe there's somebody listening in St. Louis or in Kansas City or in I don't Miami or Belfast. I don't know, and they're thinking I'd love to be able to do this kind of thing, and I have this great arts community, and we just need to. Here's our chance. How on earth do I do it?
Well, I think my background is as a designer, and I'm a pretty good builder. I'm not like a professional carpenter, but I'm a pretty good builder, and I've been building tree forts and go-karts since I was 5 years old, and I think that I've renovated a half a dozen commercial spaces. So I think the first thing is kind of having a good grasp of what a building needs, or having a good grasp of what a project needs, and if you don't have it, then to work with someone that does. And I've come into spaces and I can look up and be like, okay, how's my electrical, how is my plumbing, how is my all the things that you need and different spaces require different things, but I think that where a lot of people I think get stuck are they're not qualified to assess space, or they'll pick a space that they get for free, but that is just a lousy idea because the space that we're in is literally 1 block away from the location of the Seattle Art Fair. If this space were 20 miles away from the Seattle Art Fair, it would have been a totally different experience. So I think part of it is everyone's like location, location, location. Well, part of it is location. I think that you have to know the neighborhood that you're in. You have to know the context of what you're doing to.
But you were also able to sort of work with, this is a city-owned building, right? You were able to work with the city and large organizations to tell them what you had, the vision that you had. Whether it's not like, hello, we have an open call for people that want to have a huge satellite art fair. Please apply here. You were like, hey, I want to make contact with and just discuss and blend out, just.
Well, I think that there's 2 things. One is tenacity, in that this was the 5th space that I inquired about and was in negotiation with, and before this space there was 4 that I fought very hard for and lost. And so it wasn't like you just.
So let's just talk about how we do have a failure rate of 80%.
Oh, sure.
And now you just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, I think it's not like you just, the first space you see, someone's going to hand you the key and say, here you go. No, I had 4 other spaces that I spent a year looking at real estate, and I didn't know about the space. It wasn't on my radar. When I was negotiating my 4th space and having a difficult time with it, a friend of mine was like, well, if that one falls through, let me know because I've got a space that I think you should take a look at. And that space started to look like it was falling through, and I called my friend up, and he had some photographs of the building, and that's how that process started. But so yeah, part of it is like you kind of have to be tenacious. You have to just, if it's something that you really want, you don't give up. And I think I've given up on a million projects. I'll write a book and I'll write a manuscript and I'll send it out to like 4 publishing houses and they all say no. So I'm like, oh, okay, forget it. I'll do something else, or I'll self-publish it and I'll sell 20 copies and I'll be like, oh, forget it. Let's just move on. And then some people have one good idea and they'll spend 20 years trying to like make that idea come to fruition. I'm not that person. I'm maybe somewhere in the middle now. But I think the way that I got the space was just really keeping my ears to the ground. And I mean, it requires being connected to your community. If you don't have that kind of community structure, then you're not getting the leads on spaces, and you're not, having an army of people that are fighting for you. I think that part of what makes me stay in Seattle is that there's a tremendous community, and that they aren't cutthroat, all looking out for themselves, but they actually want each other to survive, and they want each other to succeed. And I think that's just an invaluable trait. That
Well, it
answers your
sounds like you've
question.
definitely, yeah, it does. It sounds like you've definitely rolled out of a lot of failure and like definitely figured out how to,
Hey, no.
how to turn that into a success and keep trying, you know, and really it's the keep trying, the tenacity that really is the biggest component in the eventual success. But I wonder if you have any advice for artists that have been rejected from things that you've done. Like, what about the artists that you did not select for this? For this, what is it? It was a survey of contemporary art in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm sure, as you know, as you even said, it's a hotbed. There are so many artists here. And what advice do you have for the artists that you did not select?
That's a good question. I have an answer to that. I think the truth is that art is a really subjective thing, and that there is art that I just don't like. I don't like it personally. I don't think it's either, I don't like the content, I don't like the style, I don't like the colors, I don't like the execution. There's a whole host of very finicky, very personal reasons why a curator or a dealer or a museum or an institution doesn't like something. It doesn't mean that work is belongs in a dumpster. It doesn't mean that person should give up. It just means that this one person didn't like it. What you either have to do is keep persevering and find the people that do champion your work, and they're out there. Eventually someone is going to say, I like that. And so that's part of it. It's just if one person says thanks but no thanks, take it to the next person, because that's the beauty about, it's one of the beauties about art, is that it's not that one person's opinion rules. I think that with this fair, or with this exhibition, I kind of started to get into this kind of frame of mind of like, you know what? Do it yourself. There's 3 spaces within a block of here that are for rent, that are empty, that are not as hard to secure as people might think that they are. And so, like, if you're like, hey, me and my friends didn't get into the show and we're pissed, instead of like being, you know, pissed about it, find a way to activate it. And I think that, you know, more and more artists are not responsible just for making paintings and then sitting back and being like, okay, my painting's done, world, come find me. I think that
Yeah, that's not really happening.
no, I think that artists are responsible for their web presence and for Instagram and social media and making their own postcards and being their own advocates and being their own dealers and being their own press agents. And I think that
their own luckmakers.
that requires wearing a lot of different hats, and some of those hats are finding walls to hang your work on. Part of that is just finding ways to get your work in front of people's face. I mean, I think, you know, I've done a couple of shows where it's like, if I were a 25-year-old painter and I didn't get into the show, I probably would have set up like a U-Haul van outside the entrance of this place and put down the gangplank and hung my paintings inside of the van,
right,
and had a sign on top of the roof saying, you know, really out of sight, and trying to milk off of the 6,000 people that came through the show.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
I think that's being creative, and that's being
entrepreneurial,
and that's
which seems to more be like a synonymous with being an artist.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're just the guy sitting on the sidelines drinking a beer and complaining that you didn't get invited to the show. And I think if you just sit around waiting to be invited to the show, you just grow old and bitter. Then you're an unhappy person.
And I'm sorry.
So you have to be creative, and not only creative on a canvas, but creative in the way your work is seen, and the way that you're representing yourself. And you have to be a little courageous, and you have to take chances that maybe you don't feel comfortable with. But the alternative is to not do anything, and we all know that not doing anything
leads to pretty predictable results.
Well, at best you become like a Henry Darger, and you die, and they find this magical world in your apartment, you know. But it's way more fun to kind of get that kind of visibility when you're alive.
Yeah, Absolutely. So, what would you, I mean, you kind of touched on it just a second ago, but what is your definition of success? If I say success, like, what's the first thing that
Being
comes
able
mind?
to do it with as much, being able to keep doing it. I think I think that maybe when I was 22 years old, my answer would have been, to have a show in a famous New York gallery, or to have a certain amount of like financial success. But I think to me now, at 45, I want to be 65 and still have a little twinkle in my eye, and still be a little punk rock, and still do it my own way, and not fall into this like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to do it, or this is how other people do it, or this is what sells, so I'm going to paint birds because birds really sell. I think that those are like those are terrible ways to live. I think that success is being able to have the freedom to do the kind of work that you want to do without so much outside influence. And I think that sometimes that's a split. I think that is, you have a full-time job working in a postal office, so you can have half of your life that is pure, and I think that's not a compromise. I don't see that as a failure. It might be that you paint houses half the year so you can paint canvases the other half of the year, and I don't think that's a failure. I think that it becomes a failure if you have a 10,000 square foot studio and all you're doing is the same damn painting over and over and over again, because that's what people respond to.
Or if you have no studio and you don't have any half of the year and you just paint houses when you wanted to paint canvases.
Or yes, I think that life is really. I'm gonna put a bet on we have one life to live, and
a soap opera.
Well, I mean, you never know, but I'm gonna bet that there's just one chance to do all this, and I think that from what I've heard, the thing that people on their deathbeds or in their last hours, like, I don't want to have the regret. I don't want to live with regret that said, I wish I had done this. I wish I had been stronger. I wish I hadn't been so afraid. I wish I had just done what I needed to do. And part of that's art, and part of that's love, and part of that is ego, and I mean there's a lot of components to like doing what you need to do, but I don't want to be that guy who is wishing that I had another chance. I think we have one chance. Whether it's an art fair or whether it's a pop-up in the middle of a football field, or whether it's I think that you have to recognize that time is precious, and that 2015 will come and go, and it doesn't come back. And I like to look back. I was born on December 31st, so I kind of look at my life in calendar years, and I'll look at 2015 and I'll make a list on a piece of paper, and I'll be like, this is what I did in 2015. And these are the things that you remember. It might be falling in love, or it might be going on a trip, or it might be an art exhibit, or it might be something that you accomplished. And that's like, it's that year you don't get a repeat. You don't get to do it over. You don't get to
That's it.
That's it. And I don't want to sit down on December 31st some year and be like, I watched TV and
gain 15 pounds.
Yeah, I don't want to. I want to have that list be full of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to do. It doesn't cost money. It's really not as hard as people I think it is.
So when you have this list, I mean, you've got a really good. It sounds like you got a grasp on how you can calibrate your ambition, and you can look back on it and say, okay, this is what I've done. This is where I'm looking at. And you've got these processes. I know that you also have said oh, Mondays through Fridays are this and Saturdays that, but Sunday is for strategy, like a weekly strategy. It's pretty great. I know that you've got a few of these of habits, but I'm wondering if you identify for yourself any any habits that you can really link to just how the best things that have come in your life. Any successful habits that have that you've kind of developed over the years.
Do I have any habits that are successful? No,
Any
I think
successful habits or unusual habits?
Oh, unusual habits.
Yeah.
I think that I have a terrible memory. I know that I have a terrible memory, and for better or for worse, that's just what it is. So I'm a huge list maker. I'll make a weekly list, I'll make a daily list, and I'll make a list on usually Sunday night of all the things that I need to get done in that week, and then I'll make a list Monday night of what I need to do Tuesday, and Tuesday night, it's like I kind of close my days out with what I need to do the next day, and I close my week out by making a list of what I need to do that week. And it's my way of just trying to like keep my shit in order. And it's partly because I'm stretched thin and I have kind of multiple jobs and multiple hats that I wear. So I'm a big list maker. That is one big one. What other things that I do that are in patterns?
Like in your morning, do you wake up and have a morning ritual, like things that you always do in the morning or always do before bed? I guess you make your list before bed.
I make my list before bed. My mornings, it's funny because I wake up really early. I probably wake up at 6:30 every day, which to me I consider early. But I won't get out of bed and probably till like 8 or 8:30.
Okay.
And so those 2 hours, like, I will take my time getting up, which is when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would sleep until, if I had to be at work at 9, I'd sleep until 8:45. I'd get out of bed, put on whatever's on the floor, and go 100 miles an hour to my office, and I'd be there. And like, I just have this like.
But you just had to be there.
This shock of, well, you know, I had to be present, but I've kind of found that I really enjoy like just lounging around the house a little bit, taking my time, kind of having a lazier transition from subconscious to conscious.
Yeah.
And I'll even sit, and this is my trick, is that I know it's probably terrible, but I'll check all my email at 6:30 in the morning, and if there's urgent people that need to get responded to, I'll email them from in bed in my underwear, and like it makes me look like I'm probably an early bird, but I'll kind of I'll take care of some of those early things. I read the news. I think it's really important to read the news. As depressing as, can I say fuck?
I already said it once.
No.
Yeah.
As depressing as fuck as the news is, I think that it's important to know what's going on in the world. As an artist, I don't think you can live in a bubble. I think you have to participate and on some level and understand the world around you, and that's local, that's national, that's international, that's political, that's environmental, that's social. I mean, it's just I think it is what informs us as a culture, and I think if you're going to be a relevant artist, I think you do need to process what's happening in the world. I think that's it's depressing, but I do find it to be a pattern that I do daily.
So, of all the different things that, I don't know, we kind of touched on it, one last question. Do you have any just sort of major piece of advice for either a lifestyle that keeps you going, or work, or life balance, or taking risks, or do you have one main personal mantra or motto or like piece of advice that you would want to share with someone who may be sitting, you know, at home or in their studio or in their kitchen, not even their studio like I was once upon a time, and really they are too timid to come out. They're intimidated and they're not sure how this whole art thing goes, but they just know they love it. Do you have any advice for them?
I guess two parts. One is that it's a long distance run. It's not a sprint. And if you think it's going to be a sprint, you're going to have a hard reality or a harsh awakening. It's a long distance run. And being a long distance run, you have to give yourself moments of rest, and you have to give yourself little pleasures, and you have to allow yourself to have fun. Because I think that if you look at art or look at any business and be like, I'm going to get to this mountaintop, if it kills me, and all you do is work in your studio, or all you do is
I guess that's gonna kill you.
it's not healthy for you, but it's like there's no guarantee you're going to get to the top of the mountain. There's no guarantee that you're going to get any critical success. There's no guarantee of anything. So I think it's, to me, have fun. And I think not only will it help you survive the marathon that art making is, but that it also helps you balance out. I think that, yeah, I think you have to experience life if you want to, I don't know, have fun. Don't be afraid of asking what you want, whether that's getting drunk or having sex or going on a vacation or whatever it is that allows you to relax, whatever it is that gives you time out. I think that those are very important. They're not luxuries. They're necessities.
Yeah.
And I, as much as I work, I always find time to factor in play.
That is one thing I know about you, for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
And I hope I never lose sight of that, because that makes Jack a dull boy.
Well, thank you for being the furthest thing from a dull boy, Mr. Greg Lundgren. I really appreciate you taking the time. Oh, and I want to ask, where can people find out more about you? Any URLs? Any? What can I direct people to when they're going, this great guy is great, what's up with him? What's going on?
Well, this show is a Vital 5 production, which is vital5productions.com. That's a numeral 5, which is terribly out of date, but I'm going to have that corrected sooner than later. I have a kind of conceptual project called Walden 3, which is W3, also the numeral 3, Seattle.com, which kind of lends a little bit into what I want in the world.
Okay.
I have Lundgren Monuments, which is my whole death care, my death thing, LundgrenMonuments.com.
Which is headstones mostly?
Headstones and urns, and I wrote a couple children's books about death because children needed it, I think. I don't know. Those are probably the top 3.
All right. Well, thank you so much for making yourself available and for sharing so many insights and being one of the best interviews, the longest interviews we've had. I know you said, oh, this is 20 minutes.
I can talk forever.
Man.
I can talk forever.
Oh,
thanks for having me, and always a pleasure.
Always. You're wonderful.